A community is a place where you build trust.
I want to cuss him and tell him that your product is awfully bad.
If I hear we're in the age of AI one more time, I think I'll pull my hair out.
I think the ambassador concept that you talked about is so amazing.
Well, if people don't like your product, you definitely don't want to start a community.
Alright, so hi and welcome to an amazing episode of Language Across Borders, wherein we ensure that we know stories, founders, builders, community creators are out there helping you become better. And it's a responsibility wherein we take the stories out there to people so that they can learn from the mistakes, make it better, and of course, in the end, ideas travel fast, but people and the way they operate is something that is so inspiring for us. And to make that inspiration a reality for us, we've been joined by the most amazing person I have known, Mr. Joshua Zerkel. Thank you so much for joining us. He is the author of the book, The Community Code, which is something that you should go grab a copy, look at it. He is also leading his own independent consultancy practice under the community code. With that, also the head of marketing and community at Gradual, and he highlights that he also has integrated GTM in the ways you cannot think of. So, absolutely, you're a good person for understanding the GTM infrastructure that makes a community happen with the right revenue kicking in more than $100 million of pipeline that he has created. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
Yeah, Yukta, thank you so much. I'm happy to chat with you.
Would love to jump and kickstart with the fact since you wrote a book about the community code, and I think when you start writing a book, you're writing fundamentals that you know would be scripted for years, and these are the fundamentals because a lot of things might change, but the way a few things are structured, the structures stay the same. So, what was the initial thought when you were writing the book, The Community Code? Why this title, and what is something that makes it an identity of the work and something that you speak so highly of?
Yeah, sure. So when I was writing this book right here, The Community Code, available on Amazon, everybody. The reason why I wanted to write it was because I felt like I had a really different take on the practice of building community. There's a lot of books out there on community, and many of them are very good, but they go very deeply, immediately into the weeds of here's how you run an event, or here's how you do this specific program. Those things are important, and I do cover some of that in my book. But I think the more important part, and where I've seen a lot of community programs really struggle, is understanding how community ties into the rest of the business. And when we talk about the community code, the code that I want to help people crack is how to integrate community into the rest of the go to market motion. Most of the time, when I've seen community programs, they kind of sit off to the side. They're happening, they're working with customers, but they're not really tied into how an organization is actually bringing their product or their service to market. And it's a nice thing to have, but it's not essential to the business. My entire goal and the programs that I've built help make community part of the entirety of the motion so that it doesn't feel like this disconnected thing, but that businesses really understand here's why community matters. Here's how it matters to different teams, different stakeholder teams and groups. Here's how it ladders up to bigger business goals. And here's why we should prioritize it. And so when I was writing the community code, I actually changed. I think anyone who goes through the process of writing a book, I think they have their initial idea and they probably evolve
Right.
it along the way. I certainly did. And one of the things that I evolved was my own thinking. At the time when I started writing the book, the concept of community-led growth had really gained a lot of traction. And my take on it is I don't think community-led growth as a concept actually ever happened beyond just the name. I think we as community builders really gravitated towards it because it helped put us on the map with our stakeholder organizations in a different way. But growth means many things, and usually it's directly tied to revenue, and community is typically not. And so when I was first working on the book, I really leaned heavily into the core premise of community-led growth. And the more I
Right.
dug into it, and the more that I looked at it, I don't think I didn't think for me that that was the right path to take. So I really shifted gears midway through writing the book, and really looked more through a lens of, instead of community-led growth, what does it mean if we reframe that as community integrated go-to-market and look at how community can impact these many different parts of a business? And so when I wrote, I certainly evolved my thinking, as I'm guessing many people who create works like this also do.
I think that's the best part of helping business owners and people understand that all the programs that they depend on or they want to create, community becomes a lever that they can leverage and incentivize on. And a lot of people yet do not understand. I do see that there are just like now, of course, you have Anthropic, you have OpenAI, you have leading companies, those who have head of community and marketing and social media as three different roles with different requirements. Head of events and community could be something that are similar, but then even the head of community and head of events are two different roles now that companies are looking at. So, what, like, since you work into deep diving, helping clients into your fractional consultancies, and of course at your current role as well. How do you navigate this shift when you devise a strategy or when you look at community as something that you want to start? What are the things that you consider? Do you look at, hey, we should be building an audience first, or we should be having partnerships, we should be running events? Do you look at the tactics first, or you think of something that's high level and then build on to the tactics? Like, I would love for you to walk me through the thought process that someone like you who has so much of experience has, and like what's the thought process, and then how do you start executing on that one after the other?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've seen this approached from every angle. Some people start with, like, let's just do an event and see what happens, all the way through to, like, let's not do anything until we do all of the research. And I think the answer is, for me, probably somewhere closer to the more strategic part. I feel like you can do an event, you could do an activity. I don't know how useful it's going to be, other than feeling good about we did something and we saw some customers there. That has value, but I think what has more value is understanding what the business's goals are, getting clarity around what is the purpose of community at a given organization, and then from there deciding, okay, here are the goals, here's what the community's purpose is. Next, let me talk to some people who might be part of the community, some of our most engaged customers, to understand, if we do a community program, what would make it engaging for them, what would make it valuable for them, understand what their motivations are. And then when you take those Venn diagrams and put them together, from what the company wants and needs, what the goals are, and what customers are saying in the center, that's probably where to begin, because then you are touching on those different stakeholder needs, the internal and external stakeholders, to understand what hopefully will serve the business and what hopefully will serve the customers. I think that's a much more informed way to build a community program, is get the base information that you need in order to understand, are we even pointing this ship in the right direction, rather than, are we just doing a thing over here? Community builders, in my experience, tend to hyper focused on doing a thing being an event or an activity, or start up a forum or build a WhatsApp group. Like, do a thing. Doing a thing is not the same as having a strategy. And I just work from a much more strategic place, because I want the work that I do and the programs that I build and advise on to have compounding effects. And the only way you do that is avoiding the spaghetti on the wall approach to building community, and instead say,
Yeah.
here's the hypothesis, here's why I think this will work, here's how we think this will ladder up to these bigger goals, here's how we're going to measure it, and here's our process for determining next steps after that. So my process is pretty methodical, and I think there's still room in there for experimentation. That doesn't mean don't try different things, but it's try things in service of something bigger. Because if you're not serving the bigger part of what the business's goals are, then you're not really running a community program, you're just doing a bunch of things. And if you do enough things, it can look like a program. That's the tricky part, but it isn't the same as actually having a program with a strategy behind it.
That is so thoughtful. I think the spaghetti approach is something that I've seen so many people do, like you throw it on the wall and see what sticks, which sometimes might work, but then it increases the time. Even though if you have momentum, you're compromising on the result. So I think the strategy first approach with a pre-involved hypothesis, as you mentioned, really helps to make the diagnosis. And when you talk about numbers like revenue, because a lot of business owners, a lot of people do not just want community as a nice to have, as you also talk about that in your book, but something that generates revenue. So how do you create a community that starts generating revenue? Of course, I've seen creators like Nick Sarif, Liam and like so many creators also built a crazy audience first, and then they incentivize a platform like School or creators like Ali Abdal, J Clouds. They have circle communities, and of course they have an entire business created around community subscription products, whatnot. But one thing personally that I did see in a lot of these creator or founder led business has been a huge audience or pre existing one to many audience already, like a LinkedIn, YouTube, one platform with at least 50 to 100K people following them. So, what is your like thought process? Do you think that that's really important, or how do you, as a strategist, ensure that a community from day one can be. I mean, I'm using can because for business owners it should be, but we think that can it be from day one a revenue lifter? Because then it becomes from a nice to have to I really want this in my business. So how do you navigate that challenge for yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. I am not an expert on creator led, independent, creator owned communities and monetizing them. I specialize more in B2C and B2B enterprise communities, like brand communities. But conceptually, it's more similar than different. In any given community, you need a few things. You need people who love what you do. If you don't have that, then you have no community. You may have an audience, but your audience could be in and out. If they don't love what you do, they're not going to stick around and they're definitely not going to pay you for something. You need to have a product or a service that people genuinely really like or that they care about. In the case of a brand, it's often like the core thing. Like I was at Asana, people really loved Asana. I was at Evernote, people loved Evernote. In a creator or brand community, they have to really like and love you. So if you haven't built the cult of personality around yourself, and to your point, to having that large audience somewhere is probably the place you'd want to start. If you don't have that, you don't even have the foundation to start from. So you need that. And then I think you need the willingness to understand that community is a long term play. It
Right.
can directly and indirectly affect revenue. And there's many different ways to approach how you'd measure that, but it doesn't happen overnight. And for many business owners, whether that's the independent creator all the way up and through to the gigantic enterprise companies like the ones I've worked for,
Yeah.
we're in a world of instant gratification and fast transactions. And community is actually the inverse of that. Community is a long-term relationship building mechanism. It's relationships at scale. And
Yeah.
that's great, but I don't know if you've ever met another human, but typically you don't walk up to them and say, "Hey, we just met. Would you like to get married?" Because it takes time to build those relationships. And so it's the same thing
Right.
in
Right. Right.
community.
Right.
But because we're in the business world of we need to see results tomorrow, there can be a
Yeah.
lack of understanding and patience with how community actually can work. And if you're impatient with that, then you're going to be impatient with the results that it gets. And so you have to go into building community with the mindset of this is foundation laying. It's going to take a while before we start seeing results, let alone compounding results that we can show revenue from. So you really need those elements in place if you're going to build community and build it successfully in a way that materially impacts your business.
I love the fact when you did highlight the fact that it's so much about relationship building more than anything else. Because if it's not that, you really won't have people who will stay in for long. is because if I know you personally and you say that, even I know it's for favor, would you be interested in doing something like that? You're gonna be like, of course, because I know you that well. I mean, I'm more than happy to, instead of having a favor checklist as to hey this, hey that, and all of these questions or things around. So, with that being said, since it's a long term game, how do you build a strategy that aids to this long term game? Because let's say that, a lot of B2B and B2C companies, they hire professionals like us either on a fractional or a full time capacity to help them solve a problem as soon as possible. So for them, they do not care about the things that we do, but more about the results and the outputs. So since all the companies now have shifted the narrative towards output centric companies rather than process driven companies, what is the process that or the roadmap that you follow that makes the work that you do more outcome driven, but you know that of course has a long thought process, but the outcome is faster than anything else?
That's a good question, and truthfully, I don't. There's no way to speed the outcome of community. You can't make relationships happen faster. You can't build trust faster. Community is a trust building engine, but like with relationships, trust takes time. The one thing I'll say though is if an organization is interested in being able to manage and monitor the results of community, one thing that they can do and one thing that you can offer as a community builder is we can show leading and lagging indicators of how community is performing and how it's impacting the business. In order to do that, you typically need access to data and dashboards that can help make sense of what's happening and how it connects to revenue directly and indirectly. So those things typically in my experience community gets granted later on in the process, but if you want to be able to show those things that they're happening early and that there's indicators that community is working to reach these goals, all you need is the results displayed to you so that you can show it. But community builders are often struck by not having access to those tools and those resources. So if an organization truly wants to understand community and is impatient with the process and wants to see results sooner, we can't show them all the results sooner because it takes time to actually make the results happen, but we can show what is happening sooner if the data is in place and the dashboards are there to be able to show the results. So it's less a question of how do we speed the results? You can't. It's more a question of how do we show earlier on in the process that the results are indicating that what we want to have happen is happening. And that's really related to the community team's access to data and resources to display them.
Wow. And since you, I think, highlight on a very specific and important thing, which is the tool and structure, which also brings me to understand that you were the person behind Asana as a tool, having its presence in almost more than 160 plus countries with more than hundreds of thousands of users with a crazy revenue pipeline. So, with a tool like that, and since your expertise is in B2B and B2C SaaS, and you build pipelines, how were you able to achieve those numbers, and what do you think really worked? Because now a lot of people like they just make a choice now. Do you want to use Asana or you want to like use Trello? Because Trello you just have to swipe things, but even like I use it on my day to day basis. At CCC, everyone is like, "Oh, I think just to smart the task list." And so, what were the things that worked for it to like have such a crazy expansion and people using it?
Yeah, I think this is true for Asana, Evernote, other places I've been. One, it's not just any one team or person. It's not only the community team. It's not only the marketing team. It's not only the sales team. When you have that type of growth and expansion, you need a few things. Kind of like with community in general, you need to have a product that people use and that they really, really like. Products spread when people like them. So I have spoken with some founders who I've spoken with them in a couple different instances. One, they've contacted me and said, we want to build a community because we want to expand. And I asked them about their product and how it's working. They're like, well, people don't like it. Well, if people don't like your product, you definitely don't want to start a community, because in the community they're going to say how much they don't like it. So if you haven't
Yeah,
yet found product market fit, or you know there are issues with your product or your service,
yeah,
fix that before you start building your community program, because that's how you get that sort of viral spread. Is people are excited about it, they talk about it, they share it, they talk to others in their network about it. That's part of how that growth happens. But equally, if you have a product that people don't like, people talk about
yeah,
that too, and that's what you don't want to have happen. So fix all of those things first. I've also had founders contact me when they don't even have a product or service yet, but they want to build a community. And I don't think that's a great idea, because
yeah,
it's tough to get people excited about something when there's no there for them to get excited about. You're getting them excited about a concept. To me, that feels like vaporware. So I don't I would not build a community like that personally. So if we're thinking about what really worked at a place like Asana or Evernote or others, there's a core thing, the core offering people really genuinely like, and it's truly useful for them, or they enjoy using it, or some combination of those things. Then when we talk about the expansion, there's a few things that happen. One, there's a deliberate effort by the company to say we want to spread into this region or into this country. And in my experience, I've been part, or community has been part of that expansion. Often we'll leverage community as kind of the tip of the spear when testing out the waters in a new market or in a new language. Like, as an example, I'd already had a lot of prior experience working in Japan from my time at Evernote. When I came to Asana, we didn't yet have any presence in Japan, but we had data that showed us there were people heavily using
right,
Asana in Japan. And so my suggestion was, we don't really know what the market's like there. I have experience in the market there from another company. Let's test out what it might look like
yeah,
if we did a series of community activities and activations there, to get some insight into what's happening in the market on the ground from the people who are actually using it. And so that's how you can leverage community as kind of tip of the spear, where you say, like, okay, let's go test things out, let's do a series of events, or let's recruit some ambassadors in a given geography or in a
yeah,
specific language to help us learn what's happening. And then from those learnings, we as a business can decide how we want to more strategically go to market there. So that's how some of those growth motions happen, is using
yeah.
community as the intel gatherer, so that we can make better decisions as a business as we go and spread into different markets and build advocacy and awareness in those places.
I think the ambassador concept that you talked about is so amazing. Like, Claude has Claude ambassadors in different geographies, like led by community has ambassadors. All the tech products like 11 Labs, even I think Asana has an entire ambassador community. I read this book, The Cold Start Problem, and every company from Tinder, Uber, Lyft, they've had these kind of programs wherein people were sharing feedback and trying to make it better as to what are the things that you can do that makes it better for you. And I really appreciate the understanding of creating this ambassador programs. And that's, I think, on a sub level, planting communities on the ground to see what works. Like the Next Play community, I see. I've been a part of that as well. It's one of the like leading communities on Slack, wherein you have people talk about Cursor, but they also talk about which startups have raised funds, and it more became a connection place more than them just talking about Cursor as a platform, but moreover, hey, I do this. I am looking to connect with people in this space. Do you want to jam? Do you want to connect? And it's just like, oh, hey, I think I really like you, and I want to connect and speak with you. So right now, based on the how the B2B and B2C spaces are changing, and specifically when it comes to SaaS. It's ever evolving, the requirements, the product acquisitions are so like recently SpaceX acquired Cursor for $60 billion, which is one of the heaviest acquisitions I've seen in recent times. So, what does your understanding go with the planning things, or when you structure, or when you create that like I'll say a high level view or a strategy as to this might work or this might not work. So based on the current scenario that we are in with AI rapidly changing the narrative, so many tools out there, and the fear that people might be out of business. Like today, you and I are there, other 10,000 people are there. Tomorrow, they might not even need us because who needs community when you have bots running? Even though I don't like bots, I hate talking to bots. They give me a customer care representative. I want to cuss him and tell him that your product is awfully bad. I need to be, I don't want to tell that bot that you're bad people. So, I mean, what's your view? Like, how do you think of that navigating the chaos at a high level?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working for a while, and there's always some chaos coming from somewhere. We don't always know what it is or what's coming. I'd say right now is an especially thrashy time because of the speed with which things keep changing. As it relates to AI specifically, I think this is disrupting many, many types of work, including
Yeah,
community. But I think there's a conflation that's happening that isn't quite accurate. I think a lot of people who are not as familiar with community think of community as just a place where you go and get support. And so this idea of using AI in the community as a chatbot is not really what community is about. AI is really, really good at a lot of things. It's really good at surfacing and distributing information. Like, I have a question, I have a problem. If I go into the chatbot for a given company, hopefully the chatbot is good enough that it can surface the answer. Great, I got what I needed, I'm gone. That's not community, that is a transaction. A community is a place where you build trust, not just distribute information. And so a community program may serve as part of its purpose to help people answer their product or service related questions. But if you do a good job of building the community, there's a lot more for them that will bring them closer to the business, help them get more out of it, and connect people to each other. Just as you said, people in the Cursor example were sharing information not just about Cursor, but about other things that are happening in the space. And that's what community is really good at. So the distribution and surfacing of information via AI paired with the trust building and relationship building that happens in community are really good
right.
counterpoints to each other, but they're not the same thing. And my personal take on it is, as AI makes getting information easier, the
Yeah,
trust part becomes more valuable because you have to know what you can trust and what you can't. And AI
true.
isn't really great at discerning what's trustable versus what isn't. It's getting better, but it's never going to be as good as you talking to another human and learning about their experience with a product or a service. Like when people go and they want to sign up for a new tool or a new product, they typically go and they'll do some online research, and then they'll also ask people they know and people they trust, hey, what are you using for this, or how are you solving this problem? Those two different sources of information are equally important, and sometimes the trust part is even more so in the mind of a potential buyer. So you have to think about community as this place where relationships and trust get built that can bolster what you're trying to do with AI. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's AI plus community, not AI or community.
I love when you talk about it's a combination of AI and community. So that means that as long as the humans are there, the feeling of having that human touch would stay. I would not be like, hey, eliminate humans because I don't like them. Like then you have a VR world for that. You can
Yeah,
use
that's
VR
a totally
chatter.
different thing. Yeah, I actually had a conversation relatively recently with a founder that really challenged the notion of community. They were asking, well, can't we just put a chatbot in the forum so that it can answer all of the questions for all of the things? And what I said was, you could, and that would surface the information, but no one is coming to a community looking to chat with a chatbot. They're looking typically to connect with another real life human. And so I feel like we as community builders we're perpetually branding and rebranding what community does, but I think we need to re emphasize that community is a place where humans do the human thing and it can be enhanced by the AI thing. But if you don't want to have a community, that's totally fine, but don't pretend like your AI chatbot is the community. People will get it. They know what a
Yeah,
chatbot looks and sounds like. Don't pretend like your chatbot is a human in the community because that's not what people are coming there for.
right. And you mentioned something that's so important, which makes me ask you, what do you think has been one of the most crazy case studies, or let's say you look at a business and you're like, this business did something super crazy, and you use that example as a case study to explain to a lot of founders as to if you really want to build a community, or if you look at revenue making communities, look at this business model. What's your personal favorite case study for that?
I mean, I think there are a few companies that built community into the core of their business, and you can't imagine their business without their community. Like one good example is Figma. Figma built community into the product from the very beginning. People learned about Figma by other people sharing their templates and their use cases and their designs. And their community is super robust in helping each other be successful and inspiring one another for what they can create with Figma. And they have a massive amount of Figma ambassadors who go out and host their own events. And so this is one business where I think I wouldn't have expected it to have grown so massively via community, but it's been the core motion for their entire go to market. Another really good example, and this is a bit of an older company now, but is Airbnb. Like their entire model is community based, where people in the community are sharing their spaces with others. They have a community of those people who are hosts and super hosts, and this is really interesting to me because if you think about it, I'm a person who has a room or a house to rent. Like, what would be the purpose of community for me? But they completely turned it on its head and made it a very robust place for people to share best practices and connect with one another and connect with their community in the offering of their spaces. So I think there's really good examples of various types that we can point to where community has been truly integral to their business and their go-to-market model. This proves the point that community isn't just a place where you go and get your problem solved. That can be
Yeah,
one aspect of it, but if you do it well, it's so much more. Like when we built the community program at Asana, support deflection wasn't our core goal. That was one of the things that we were doing, but we really wanted to build brand advocates and awareness. We wanted to deepen people's usage of Asana. We wanted to increase the depth of usage on a team of Asana. And that's what we focused on. We didn't really focus on helping people solve their technical problems. That was one of the things, but it wasn't the core thing. It was a combination of goals that we had. And I think if you build community well, it can achieve these different things, but you have to structure it
right.
programmatically to do that.
So when it comes to building and creating brand advocates who would be talking about your brand, and basically on the front end are your brand representatives, because you as a CEO, as a head of community, as a head of marketing cannot be there every single point in time. So how do you create that psychology within the consumers wherein they are happy being the brand advocate? Like today, if I say that as an influencer, hey, we have a budget of $50. Can you please make a promotional post? I know the incentive that you have is $50, not the product. Like for celebrities, they promote some things that they should not be talking about as well, but it's the money that's driving the bank.
Hmm.
For the is like the B2B space or the B2C space, people are genuinely loving that product, and they're like, you know what, use Canva, you know what, use Asana. You like, let's say right now at Gradual, you're creating a go to market, and they're talking about how great the company is or the thing that any new initiative that the company comes with. So, how do you build that? I mean, that psychological space for people to like the cult following, which like I
Yeah.
won't care about, like the money in bank, but I really just love it and I'm talking about it.
Yeah, this is where I would make a clear distinction between community versus influencers. Influencers you pay, community you typically don't. Influencers you pay because they may not be familiar with or may not even care about your product or service. Their job is to get money from you so they can advertise for you. It's a transaction. That's totally fine. It's a motion of marketing. It works in some cases, less so in others, but it's something that exists. It's a known quantity. Community is ideally populated with people who really like what you do. They have been materially positively impacted by your product or your service. And when they have been, then they get excited about talking about it. And in order to get them to talk about it, I am generally not a fan of bribery. Like, I don't like giving people, here's like $50 to go post on your social media. Like, that feels
Yeah.
super wrong to me. I know Some companies do it. If that's right for you, that's great. I personally, as
Yes.
a strategy, am not a fan. However, I do like setting the conditions, creating the possibilities for people if they want to advocate. And advocacy can look like many different things. It can just be me having a conversation with one person. It could be me hosting an event. It could be me posting online. It could be me hosting a webinar. It could look many different ways. It could be me just having a sticker on the back of my laptop with the brand's logo on it. Advocacy looks different. And so when I think about a community program, I think of it kind of like a buffet. On the buffet, there might be like 20 different things that people could eat, but most people won't come in and eat them all. They might have like three things, or maybe they're not that hungry that day and have one thing, or maybe someone is like ravenously hungry and has 10 things, but no two people are going to take exactly the same things. And so I like having this array of ways that people can participate in a community program. Everything from I'm a lurker and I just want to read stuff, all the way through to I want to be a super ambassador. I want to know all the ways I can talk about it. I want you to give me like canned templates. I want the assets and the resources. I want the event hosting guide. I want everything. And then there's the people who are in between who will do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and might go dormant for a while and then come back. You need to have all these things available to your members because you don't know what's going to resonate with people. And so you can do surveys, you can ask them, you can make your best guess, but the truth is, humans are going to human, and you need to be able to give them different ways that they can adapt to what's available in your program and what's happening in their own worlds at any given time. And so when we think about helping people be advocates for us, we need to be flexible in what that can look like and give people an array of ways, give them a full buffet of ways they can participate.
I think I totally understand it better now, and I really appreciate you to map this out there. Is because you need to give them everything like a buffet, and they can choose the dish that they like. I might like pudding, you might like vegetables, different things, or you might like sausage, and I'll be like, you know what, this is not my
Not
thing,
today.
and not today. And maybe you and I might like the same thing, and we become like the experts on doing things together in the community. So, with that understanding, we also have a segment which is 90 seconds to teach me something. So, right now, if I give you 90 seconds, what would you like to teach and talk about?
That's a really good question. I think the most important thing that I can teach you or our listeners is we as community builders really like to focus on the doing of the work, the building the program, the running the programs, the having the relationships with community members, getting people to connect to us and to each other. That's all great. But the thing that really needs to be taught is how to report what you're doing to your stakeholders and to your leadership. So this involves everything from one, understanding what the leader's goals are, like what are the highest goals at your company that leadership cares about? And then what are the goals of the stakeholder teams that are laddering up to those? And then from my perspective as a community builder and leader, I need to build relationships with all of those people so that I understand on an ongoing basis their goals and what's changing in their worlds. So that then when I go back to them, I can say, here is how community is specifically laddering up and impacting positively the goals that you already have. I don't want to ask them to do any extra work. Instead, I want to make sure that they understand how community is already helping them with the things they're trying to achieve. So, if there's one thing that I could help people learn, or at least put on the radar that they should learn, is this notion of community cannot sit off by itself, just focusing on engagement metrics and how many people are showing up and how many people are coming to the community each month. We need to understand that as community builders because that tells us the health of our program. But far more important is being able to translate what all of that activity results in for the business and for each of the stakeholders. So if there's any one thing to learn, it's how to do that, how to have the stakeholder and executive conversations and report to them on the things that matter to them. Because if you go into an executive conversation and say, oh, we had 50 people show up at our event last month, they're going to say, great, so what? And you need to be able to answer the so what question.
Wow. I took 20 seconds to understand what you just talked about because this is so important to understand and connect the dots. A lot of us miss on connecting dots, and we feel that we should always be in 100% operator mode, which is not the case. For you to act into that 100% operator mode, you need to know what's fueling that up. And the time that you take to create those fueling maps and decisions is how the operator incentives would follow along. So that is one of the key highlights for this conversation that we had, which also brings us to a crazy segment that we do. It's called Seven Questions to Fame. So once you're ready, I'll be throwing seven questions on your way, and feel free to be as precise as you can.
Yeah, go for it. Let's do it.
Okay. So what is the identity that you resonate the most with? An author, a community builder, an entrepreneur, or you would like to create something for yourself and call yourself a multi-passionate person?
I think if there's one identity, it's a learner. I'm constantly trying to learn new things. I'm not an expert on what I do. I feel like I'm constantly trying to learn new things about it and new angles into it. I'm trying to learn about people and what motivates them. I'm trying to just understand our world in general. So I feel like I'm a perpetual learner.
I mean, that's a really nice one. The next question goes like, if you had to choose to be a part of a company and you feel that if I am here, I can accelerate the progress of how they look at community or be an acceleration engine for them, what company would that be?
I can't name a specific company, but I think there are a few conditions that make that possible. I think one is product market fit. Typically, this happens like post Series A, I'm guessing like Series B through E, um, either already global or anticipating being global because you can't control the boundaries of where your community lives. And so I would look for a company that is like headed in that direction if they're not already there. But above all, I think a company where leadership believes that community should be integral into how they go to market. If you don't have that, you probably shouldn't take a job at that company because if leadership isn't bought in, you're going to get questioned every step of the way. And not that other stakeholders shouldn't ask you questions about what you do, but they shouldn't be questioning the existence of your function. And I've seen that happen in many cases. So you really do need leadership buy-in in order to have that growth be successful.
Makes sense. The next question goes like, if you had to choose one tactic and guided that this is one tactic that would give you 60 to 70% of highest conversions when it comes to building a community, what would that tactic be?
I think when it comes to like direct impact, that's easy to see, easy to understand. Events are typically the clearest one because, frankly, either you have people show up or you don't. They're of the right target or they're not. They take follow on actions after the event or they don't. Like you can get a lot of information very rapidly from events, provided they're at a big enough scale so that you can start building some understanding off the back of them.
Makes sense. Apart, what book inspired you to write your own book, The Community Code? What was an inspiration, if not a book, but inspiration behind you writing your own book?
Yeah, so when I first started floating the idea of writing a book, I asked a couple of my peers what they were thinking, and one of them was also starting to write her own book. And so the process of that person writing her book inspired me to like really buckle down and do mine. So that book just came out actually right around the same time that mine did in March or April. It's called Your Best Meeting Ever by Dr. Rebecca Hines. She and I worked together at Asana, and I'm very proud of both of us because I think we inspired one another.
Well, I'm definitely, you know, deep diving into her work as well now. The next question looks like, if you had to make a choice between go to market strategy or a community strategy, what will you choose first and why? Or it could also be a content or something else.
I hesitate to put them at odds with one another because I think community is part of go-to-market strategy if done well. I don't know that you can do community without having a broader go-to-market strategy because you need a market to go bring your community to. So if I had to choose between the two, I mean, you need go-to-market because that's how you literally bring your product to market. Community can and should be an integral part of that, but it's not the entirety of the motion. It's not sales, it's not success, it's not support, it's not marketing. It touches all of those things, but you need all those other pieces in place in order to build a successful community.
And the last question for you on this round will be understanding all the aspects of go to market, community, content, and different things. If you had to choose and stick with the first step of driving revenue as a lever, what would your first choice be or an advice be to a business who comes to you and says that I don't know anything, I'm just concerned with hitting my first million or first 100K? What would you advise them?
That's a tough question because it depends on the nature of the business.
Yeah.
Community is not the fastest path to revenue. I'm not going to pretend like it is. If you need fast revenue, like a big sales led deal can get you there, but sales led growth typically takes a while. Product led growth is typically faster, but the deal sizes are usually smaller. So it really depends on the nature of the business. Community can amplify and ideally speed up each one of those processes, but either of them is going to take some time. There is no shortcut magic wand. You can't microwave your way to revenue, just like you can't speed your way to relationships. It's the same idea. And if you don't have a core product that people actually want, adding any of these elements isn't going to make that happen more effectively.
I totally love it, and I love how precise the answers were. And to add on to your point, as you said, that community should be treated as relationships. It's more like since you cannot make these decisions on the go, you need to be very specific with how do you build onto those relationships and choose to nurture them. And even with businesses, I tell my friends that you marry a person, but you don't marry a business. So you can think of an exit strategy first. So marry once a human, but you can associate and dissociate from businesses.
No,
With
the funny thing about that is like I've built many communities over the years. Even though I've moved company to company, I still have some of those relationships with the community members who are part of the communities that I was responsible for helping lead. So, like you build these relationships and they stick with you over time. And I think that's a thing that businesses would be wise to understand is, you know, you're building relationships with real life humans and all the relationship dynamics that come into play with human to human relationships are part of that deal, including longevity.
oh yes, absolutely. With that, I know we're towards the end, and I would love to deep dive with you, wherein if you would love to emphasize on something that you feel we missed out on, or we should be talking about it, I would love for us to take a moment to deep dive into something that you would like to activate or think upon.
Yeah, I think, if I hear we're in the age of AI one more time, I think I'll pull my hair out. But the truth is, I think we all are at a point where we can really think about now that we're in this space where AI is part of our world, how do we
Yeah.
balance all of the good things that that can offer with all of the things that only human to human connection can bring for all of our businesses and all of our programs? I think the conversations I've been having lately, the AI portion of it is a balance that needs to be struck with the human to human component of it. And as we've been talking about, there are many big and small ways that these things can come together. AI can enhance the community experience. Community can enhance the information that a company has at its disposal and can build trust around its brand. And so I encourage everyone who is watching or listening to think about both of these things are here to stay. How do we make each one of them the best it can be, and how can we make them work together in ways that make the most sense?
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's been an insightful discussion with you from navigating community to how you've been able to manage such big portfolios. And if there's one last thing that you would want people to remember you with, what would that be?
I would just say like, hey, I'm a person just like the rest of you. I'm still figuring all of this out. I have a lot of experience doing this one specific thing in the world of go to market, but I'm still learning just like the rest of you. So wherever you're at in your own community building journey, just know it's a process, and we've all been there, and we'll all go there at other points, and we're figuring this out together. And that's what community is. It's us figuring things out together.
Thank you so much, Josh, for this episode. I truly appreciate you taking our time and making this happen.
It's my pleasure. I encourage all of you to connect with me on LinkedIn. There's only one Joshua Zerkel there, as far as I know. So I invite community connections. And if you have questions about community, you can always visit me at thecommunitycode.com. Or if you have questions about community platforms, visit me at gradual.com. Like, I'm everywhere. So easy to find and happy to connect.